The only person I guess could help is your therapist, but like
Mm-hmm.
no one really can help you. Like I can, like yeah, like I guess your family and like let's say you're dating someone could really support you, but they can only help you so much. At the end of the day, it's all about you and how you bring yourself to the next day.
I will say that sometimes my disorders almost counteract each other in the sense that, I'm impulsive for ADHD, but then my anxiety kind of pulls me back on that other side. It's really just pretty. It's difficult. It's not easy to especially trust people and reach out to them. They get to know everything about me that I want them to know. At the other part, but the drawback is that I don't know how trustworthy these people are. A lot of times with depression, it's changes your perception, as I mentioned before. So oftentimes I feel a little bit like I physically cannot perceive that excitement. Things that would normally bring me joy no longer bring me joy. Imagine you have everyone's in color, but someone took like an eraser and erased all the color in your body. And you're walking through life in black and white while everyone else is in color. I think a lot of people associate autism with flapping their arms, lack of verbal communication, and other issues that I do not have. And I think that kind of just goes to show autism is such a spectrum.
What's hard about mental illness is that there's so much they can help you with. It's a very individual battle.
And that was one thing that I learned is not just moving on from the person, but also taking the experience itself and learning from that experience as a whole. So moving on isn't just about moving on from that individual, but it's also taking that learning experience and applying that and changing yourself as a person.
I think the biggest part of like that's hard for everyone is how to learn to let go. Should we
Manner.
start shouting at each other just for the
No.
podcast? Hello, welcome to my podcast, to Mics One JoeySooch. I am Joe Sooch, and I'll be giving a mic to Madeline. She's a high schooler right now. She was diagnosed with ADHD at 7, anxiety at 10, autism at 13, and major depression at the age of 16. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm a little bit tired, but overall, I'm here, and I guess that's what matters.
Well, thank you for giving me your time and waking up early to talk to me.
Thank you so much for letting me come on here. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, we talked before on a project, and I was kind of like, I wouldn't say touched, but I liked your tenacity and I liked your go-getting drive. So I just feel like I had to invite you here. You're my
Thank you so much.
yeah, you're my youngest guest ever. So
Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
yeah, it's hard to find younger kids these days, I guess, and I also feel a little weird looking at little kids in a way because it's just the age difference. But we met through a disease, my disease, and that's how we met. So I'm glad you were able to reach out to me, and then I helped you with your collaboration. Now you're helping me out. So win-win.
Yep.
So let's talk about what condition do you hate the most that I listed before.
Depression. That is 100% the one that has been probably the most detrimental to me. I mean, anxiety is pretty bad too, I will say, but ADHD and autism are things that more impact my social life, and ADHD I've had years to work on it because my diagnosis was at 7, and ever since I was 7, I was given research, I was given all these kinds of things that helped me to manage my symptoms. Whereas with depression, it's a lot harder because of the way that it impacts me. It basically takes away a lot of my motivation. It negatively impacts how I perceive the world and how I perceive other people. So I will say that I struggle socially very much because of it. And overall, it's very hard sometimes to even just get out of bed in the morning, to eat on a regular schedule, to shower on a regular schedule. It's a very detrimental disease, and I think a lot of people, despite the fact that a lot of Americans do have it, it's often something that, you know, doesn't necessarily show fully to the person how detrimental it is unless you are that person.
Yeah, I was gonna say you made a great point that you really don't know what depression is until you have it. It's just something, and it's like not. It's also not something you can like get over in a day. Sometimes some people take years, or they sometimes they never get over it. I mean, the medication helps and such, but it's something that stays with you for long periods of time or forever. Like, I had my depression bits, so it's always like curious of why some people stay in their depression state longer, or why some need, you know, need medicine to help. Like, what makes me different versus you when you need more help in that arena? Like, is it a chemical imbalance? It could be a male versus female dynamic. It's interesting because it's like so different from everybody else. Like, and then there's people can be depressed, but like sometimes you just never know it either. So there's a lot of, I guess, faking it till you make it kind of style too. So it's a very weird disease to like work with. Like, and then the hard part is that like the only person I guess could help is your therapist, but like no one really can help you. Like, I can, like, yeah, like I guess your family and like let's say you're dating someone could really support you, but they can only help you so much. At the end of the day, it's all about you and how you bring yourself to the next day.
I would definitely say that, yeah, ultimately it is my therapist who has been the most help, and medication, having my support system has been for a while pretty unstable, so, like friends will go in and out, sometimes my family will fight, and that's been a big, that's definitely been a big issue. I will say that.
Well, I did want to say that I'm older than you, so that's the normal life of friends coming in and out of your life. Like, if you think about like you're growing up, every 4 years you're in a different environment. So you go from, middle school to high school, that's 4 years. High school to college, that's another 4 years. So, and then like let's say you're in jobs, like every 4 years or so you get new jobs, or you get promoted or whatever, and you have a whole new set of friends. So that's just kind of how life is. You're just kind of making new friends and getting rid of old ones. But I also want to add that you're also growing too. So sometimes you're just outgrowing your friends. They have different interests and stuff. I grew up, liking sports, but then like I got into filming. So like those people are not. I mean, they were cool, but like we just have different interests. So now I'm made a whole new set of friends that are in the filming industry. But then it's also the same with like mental illness. They don't have depression and stuff, so now I'm meeting more people that have depression and stuff. So like your life is always changing, and their lives are always changing too. So like you keep getting new friends. I guess it's kind of exciting because you're meeting new people, but at the same time, it is tough to like reintroduce yourself, and like I feel like it's harder for you with your anxiety, that it's harder to keep friends. Like you don't want to make more friends. You just want to have a steady friendship too. So like you build up on each other. You don't want to like explain yourself every single time, which can be really, especially for someone that doesn't know what anxiety feels like or what depression feels like.
Yeah, I would say it's hard, especially with the combination, because I will say that sometimes my disorders almost counteract each other, in the sense that, I'm impulsive for ADHD, but then my anxiety kind of pulls me back on that other side. And there's a lot of things that really go on. I also have past trauma, which I probably won't get into in this podcast, that have contributed to where I am now in terms of my mental health. I will say that, it's really just pretty, it's difficult. It's not easy to especially trust people and reach out to them. If I lose a group of friends, then, I'm in that position where I know that I need to try to reach out and make more, otherwise I will suffer from loneliness, I guess.
Yeah.
But then there's that added bonus of like, okay, what do I do now? Because, I have a blank slate, so on one hand, they get to know everything about me that I want them to know. At the other part, but the drawback is that I don't know how trustworthy these people are. So, especially online and with our social media and reaching out to people online, that has been, obviously there's various risks with that wouldn't be, as prevalent in person, essentially. But
were you surprised when I contacted you back?
A little bit, yeah. But, I was happy, and,
Yeah, I mean, I don't always work with people on my project. It kind of depends how they approach me. Like some are just like you saw me kind of as a person and just like made it like you made it seem more, you approached me in a mature way, which was really nice. Like some people will just approach me as like I'm a subject and just like you ask questions that like you couldn't find online. Like some people realistically will ask me like, what does the disease do? And I'm like, Google it. I'm here to help. Like I'm here to help with like questions that are not easily find, but like there's stuff that you can do on Google. And then at the same time, I also try to I tell a lot of younger people, I say, like you have to do your research on your own too. Like you're wasting my time. Like, but like you came in with a mature approach. Like, hey, I have this project. I know all about it already. Like you don't have to like introduce yourself. Like blah blah blah. And then so I would I was more than happy to help you out because it was just a much nicer exchange. So if you so just keep doing that, and that's great. You got my attention, so here we are.
Yeah, well,
But
I'm glad that things worked out.
oh
So,
yeah, so you mentioned that like you lost your friend. So how do you feel like that you're going into right now? You're in a hotel looking at colleges. So do you feel kind of like a light of hope because you're gonna be in a whole new environment with a lot of new people? That's not even in your area, but now you're meeting people that are, out of state or even out of country.
in a way, yes, I think that the non-depressed side of me, or the part that's, able to kind of function, I guess the more functional side of me is definitely excited because, again, I don't know where I, haven't gone in really, so I'm looking forward and I'm trying to keep an open mind. So maybe I did get into a target school, maybe I did get into a reach school. It really all depends. But I will say that a lot of times with depression, it's changes your perception, as I mentioned before. So oftentimes I feel a little bit like I physically cannot perceive that excitement. Things that would normally bring me joy no longer bring me joy is to nearly that degree. I'm less excited. Things kind of just feel like, imagine you have everyone's in color, but someone took like an eraser and erased all the color in your body. And you're walking through life in black and white while everyone else is in color. That's kind of what it's like I guess, in a metaphorical term.
No, that's a great analogy. You pretty much nailed it. Well, like, I just want to say I haven't officially been diagnosed with depression, but I definitely had my depression bouts. But I guess I was able to get out of it, but I still have a small cloud, I guess, over me about it. But I was in a similar situation with you that when, like, senior year of high school, I was depressed, very depressed myself, and like the only glimmer of hope for me was college. Like I'd be meeting all these new people and such. Because like it's harder to make friends. It's easier to make friends when you're younger in a sense, but it's also easier to make friends when you're older because you're with more mature people and there's so much differentness out there that of course I didn't meet anyone that I liked after the 4 years of college, so that doesn't help. But it gave me hope that like maybe there'll be some group or one person out there that I'll be able to befriend and connect with and become close with. Of course, that didn't happen to me because I had my own set of another set of challenges on top of that. But it's the hope that helps me like get me to the next day almost.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Oftentimes, it's the littlest things that bring me back to reality, especially if I'm in a very large depressive episode. So it's the little things, like thinking about picking up sea glass on the beach was one of them. It's, fixations or focusing on a science project that I'm doing. Oftentimes, those small things are able to kind of bring me back to reality in the things that I don't typically think about in my daily life as much. But when I'm in, such a horrible state, those are the things that I gravitate to. Those are the things that my brain can just kind of latch on and fixate on until I'm able to bring myself back to reality, I guess.
I wonder if a change of environment will help you out too.
Definitely. I will say, because my school is very different in terms of many of the people, being a minority in a mostly white school, being part of the LGBTQ community in a school which is Catholic and many people are, very opposed to that, is pretty hard in general. And then on the other side of being in a difficult social situation. And, you know, I will say that my family life has been rocky in the past. So I think that definitely a change of environment is really going to help me.
Yeah, I mean, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope you have the best 4 years of your life.
Thank you. Yeah, I've heard so much I've heard so many things about college, and it's great that you meet your peeps, and you know, I'm excited.
Yeah, so let's go back because, like, we all been young at one point of our life. So, like, how does someone diagnose with you? So, have you here, you were diagnosed with ADHD at 7, anxiety at 10, autism at 13. How does someone diagnose you properly? Because, like, when I do tests, I'm not always, like, serious. Like, how did you
Um,
take the test seriously so that, like, you could have been, like, like, not taking this test seriously? So, if you have ADHD, you could have just pretending not to want to do it because the last thing you want to do is another test. You know, so how do you take it seriously, or how do they make it that it's a serious situation?
I think you just kind of do it, and you try to do it based on, you know, the most accurate representation of yourself. You just kind of let it free flow. There's many ways that doctors will do this. I remember for my autism diagnosis specifically, they looked at my past history, so behaviors that were associated with autism, such as my hyperfixations and stims that I did. So one of the stims I still have trouble getting over with is I will, especially if I'm stressed, I will, you know, scratch my head like this to the point where it is bleeding. So that is definitely something that, you know, I've had to work with, and I've tried to put out of my mind, or other things like that. I will say that, yeah, just really being yourself, or, you know, when I was younger with ADHD, and I got my diagnosis, I wasn't really aware of what they were doing with me, but I knew that I remember going into cognitive behavioral therapies. I remember really having a different experience than many other kids, evaluations, and these evaluations would come back and they would show, like, maybe I'm high in IQ but low in EQ, or things that would raise suspicions that I was neurodivergent. And then eventually, typically, like a practitioner or someone or a psychologist would take those files and kind of compile them and say, like, okay, most of these match up with the symptoms presenting to this disorder. I would recommend you going on medication or continuing cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, so it just seemed that it wasn't really a one-day test. It was more of a observation over, I'm guessing, many months of your behavior, and then they just kind of pieced the puzzle together of what you may possibly have.
Yeah, that's definitely what happened. Oftentimes they will look at child behavior and, you know, early childhood, my interactions with others, and things like that, and ultimately get a better glimpse of what's going on. I remember that 3, my parents actually did suspect that I had autism, and some other therapists did suspect that, but it was never formally diagnosed until I was 13, which is, you know, a big long jump from 3. So it was to the point where I think people kind of didn't assume immediately that I had autism, because a lot of my stims were pretty under the bar, so not inherently noticeable. The way that I talk is a key indication of some forms of autism, in terms of being a little professor, as they used to call it. And then hyperfixation is one of them. But to someone who is talking to me out front, I'm very verbal. I don't, you know, I think a lot of people associate autism with flapping my arms, lack of verbal communication, and other issues that I do not have. And I think that that kind of just goes to show autism is such a spectrum, and, you know, not everyone's going to be extreme. I may not be someone who's incapable of basic speech, but I'm also not a savant syndrome patient who is this, you know, genius or mathematical super person, you know.
I mean, I want to say that, like, I think your autism is actually a good thing if you're into the bio field, because you kind of need that. Like, I think, like, I met, like, a lot of medical people, and, like, obviously they're all smart, but I think the one big barrier, I think, is the communication key. like you study all about, like what this is, what that is, like everything that they know, it goes way over my head. But sometimes they have difficulty explaining it to people. And I feel like in your case, your autism comes well into play because then you're able to talk to like me and like talk and like I could understand it. So like you mentioned, like you have the professor speaking, but like it's actually a good thing for you because I think it'll help you be better than most people in that field.
I will say that once you get to the adult age, I think every scientist is going to have a relatively high vocabulary, and it will be relatively easy for them to communicate. I'm not saying that there aren't scientists out there who are disabled or have other verbal speech impairments, but I will say that I think the majority of people in that field would be able to, I guess, thoroughly communicate their points. In
No, I
terms
mean,
of mine, yeah.
I'm gonna say there's just some they're just very smart, but like they don't know how to talk well. Sometimes you see in like professors, they're really smart, but like sometimes it just doesn't come out the way that easy for someone like me to understand. So I feel like that you have a huge advantage in that area, and you have it so young already. Like you're gonna get better in 10 years, so that's a huge plus for you. Dude, like you can't really teach it in a way. Like yes, you can take a class or two, but like it can only take you so far. But since you already have it now, without even trying, I think that's a huge plus for you.
I will say that, especially when I was younger, this did make communication with kids my age very hard.
Oh, that no, you're totally right about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but I was always able to communicate with older people, adults. This has always been something that I'm very well in terms of communicating with people who are much older than me. That's just something that I've always found pretty simple. Maybe that's just because I have older parents. Maybe that's just because of my autism, but I will say there is that definitely that difference between me communicating with adults versus me communicating with people my age.
no, I totally get. I think like one thing is when you have like a chronic illness of any kind at a younger age, you have to mature older because like you have to understand like because you can't fight the diseases you have. You have to like work with it within its limits, and like you have like I'm sure you didn't fully understand for like the first couple of years, and then it finally hits you and like no, I can't. I don't. Is it getting older, mature, or whatever? Or maybe you get like a reality check or someone that sits you down. It's like, hey, like you have this, like you can't be this person. Like something hits you, and then you just start working within your limits, and then like you're self-aware. Like you said, your kid. Like, you talk to other kids, and you can't really talk to them because they're not the same as you, and that's. I mean, it really sucks when you're growing up like that. But like, I want to say that you're higher than a lot of people because you have like skill set that's highly desirable. Like you just don't see it yet, but I already see it already, and like I think it will help you a lot in the future. Like,
I think that I would describe my disorders and my perspective on life a bit like this. So say that you have two level surfaces, and then you really strive in this, but you're really low in this. Most people are like that, and I'm kind of like this, where there are some things that I obviously really struggle with. For some reason, I struggle with more abstract stuff, oddly enough, for someone who's interested in science. And there are some things that I really strive at. So, for some reason, I've always just been pretty good with biology. Some things in English history make sense, and then math is
but
just.
how did abstract equal science though? Because science is very definite. Like you have, let's say, an idea of something, the whole point is you try to prove it or disprove it. So, but like nothing is abstract in science either, yes or no.
Abstract just means like things will come together. So an abstract thought would be something like you're taking a piece of paper and you're reading it and then you're imagining it in 3D, so a different perspective, and bringing it together in that way. Something that's very abstract is many mathematical equations using certain formulas, but also many calculations and many systematic aspects. And for some reason, that just doesn't work with me in terms of math, but it very much exists with me in science. Like, I'm very able to put everything kind of together. Whereas in math, that just, I don't know, it's like an error in my code. It just, like a kryptonite, it just doesn't work for me.
No, like you see your strengths and you see your weaknesses. Is the biggest hurdle for you autism or is it ADHD or depression? Like, what do you think will play a big role in your, let's say, your college and then your career?
Definitely depression. Anxiety is actually not a huge issue in terms of academics. It's more of a huge issue in regards to social life, but that in turn can impact my future in the long run because it kind of is isolating. But I will say that, as I mentioned before, depression has really kind of kicked out the motivation that I've always relied on to be who I am, essentially. I very much rely on this academic drive and this passion that I have for science. That's always what's kept me going, but with depression, that's almost been tainted and it feels like it's fading sometimes, so it's really hard to kind of find the energy to bounce back from that. My ADHD and autism, they come with their challenges, I will say. So peculiar behavior, it's harder for me to get along with people my age, but ultimately there are many strengths of it, such as, being impulsive is actually kind of a double-edged sword because on one hand, it does put me at a position where I will make some sorts of I will make rash decisions, and I might do things that could get me in a lot of trouble. So, like, I remember sending an email out to the entire school advocating for a school therapist, and it wasn't my intention that was bad, but I will say the school was definitely not happy with me just emailing the entire student body at 9 o'clock at night. So,
Oh no.
yeah, the administration definitely was a little bit peeved at me, but ultimately they understood where I was coming from
Wait, were
because,
they
again, the
were they
intention.
mad at you because you sent about therapy, or were they mad at you that you kind of didn't ask anyone for permission to send an email?
I didn't ask anyone for permission. That was the
Uh,
big one because it was kind of an on the whim decision. I was very fed up with hearing, how much our school talked about giving us mental health resources and talked about Suicide Prevention Month, but yet did barely anything to really actually give the students resources to survive. And as someone who's depressed and as someone who, really struggles at school as a result of my depression, I felt like they were promising all these things and then just not delivering them. So that really made me upset, and I decided, you know what, screw it. I'm going for it. I'm just emailing the entire
how do you even
body.
have access to the whole body?
I'm not supposed to, but so our school does this weird thing where we have emails, and then it's like class of 2022, class of 2023, and then you put those in the email, and then it sends out to everyone.
So you just had access to the list?
Yep.
Oh my god. Okay,
I'm
you're a
pretty sure
bad
they removed
girl.
that. Yeah. I think they removed that privilege to regular students as soon as I sent that out. Like, I'm pretty sure that doesn't exist anymore because of me.
That's a dangerous weapon.
Yep.
So let's talk about high schools. I know you went through a really traumatic bullying moment. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, so it was mainly my elementary school, which had to do with a lot of bullying and other issues. It was also that there was a lot of teacher neglect, so there would be issues and they wouldn't be properly addressed. I remember clearly coming to the teachers with like physical wounds from altercations with other kids, and they just really didn't do anything. They just said, "I didn't see it, so I don't know who to blame. Oh well." And it was like, that's not taking care of children. Just because you didn't see it didn't mean it didn't happen. And I think that that's a common thing that definitely needs to be addressed. I'm not saying that all teachers are bad. I do respect teachers very much for the jobs that they do, but I do think at the same time they need to be aware of the fact that, there's other things going on about students and that you need to investigate that. You need to understand what's going on and not just keep kids in line. High school, it was traumatic in a very different way, as in I was still figuring out a lot of things, and the group I joined really didn't understand where I was coming from. There was a lot of stigma around my mental health, and I would push people away. Or I remember clearly a friend who really tried to help me, and I really kind of pushed her away. I didn't really know what to do because I just didn't know how to listen and how to take her advice. And I said, "You're not helping me." And that really made her upset because she had tried to do a lot of things, and that really severed our connection. And I really wish that, going back on that, I really wish that I had just, even if I don't feel like this is helping, even if I don't feel like other people are helping me, that doesn't mean that they aren't trying and that I shouldn't give them credit for what they're doing. And I think that's something that it's taken me right up until this point to really hammer in terms of philosophy.
Have you ever apologized and just say that, like, sorry, how the way I acted, but I do appreciate what you were doing for me?
I've tried on occasion, but this person will not converse with me, even in situations where we're not talking about that. So if I just ask, like, hey, what block do you have next for class? Or, hey, what was the homework for this class? She will not answer. And I understand that I definitely hurt her. I understand that I've, really done a lot of things that are ultimately very fucked up. But at the same time, it's pretty inconvenient to have people just flat out ignoring me with no willingness to have an open mind. I don't expect anyone to, in that situation, to like immediately be my friend or anything, because I understand what I did was wrong, but that doesn't mean that they have to completely shut me out in terms of even just giving an apology.
Yeah, that's like I mentioned before. That's what's hard about mental illness, that there's so much they can help you with. It's a very individual battle. Like the only thing that does help is the effort and just staying around the person is helpful. But like there's nothing you can say to that person that will help. Just being there, just not going away. I think it's just better than 99% of people. I guess where you're coming from. I guess where she comes from too. I mean, I guess the best thing you could do is apologize and say, hey, I was in the wrong. I appreciated your help, and then if she doesn't respond, then that's not your problem anymore. Like that's just kind of how it goes. It's I guess the thing is you just gotta move on. Like if you're just stuck in the past all the time, then just you can't really go anywhere, and that's what sucks about life, that you can't really, like, the easiest thing is really just to move on, because then you can, or you'll just be stuck in the past all the time.
And that was one thing that I learned, is not just moving on from the person, but also taking the experience itself and learning from that experience as a whole. So what I mean by that is learning how to accept that people are trying to help me, even if I don't personally feel it, and not just accept that that particular person is gone, but actually apply this, to a greater extent, apply this in future relationships. I think that was something that really took me a long time to understand, that moving on isn't just about moving on from that individual, but it's also taking that learning experience and applying that and changing yourself as a person and applying that to other relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only way for you to learn is through experiences. If I could tell you the situation before it happened, and then you probably just like scoff me off and like not understand it fully. It's like that's the best way to really just have that relationship, have it fail or whatever, and then you learn from it. That's truly the best way to do anything in life.
Yeah, definitely.
It's tough out there, but it's also a very valuable experience for you, because it will stay with you forever, and into future relationships of what you have to say or not to say. Like what I noticed in your pattern is that you always try to be a very mature person in this, and your problem is everyone around you is not mature. So like you have this weird disconnect that you have like a big advantage that people don't see, and unfortunately it's hurting you more. But in the future it will help you so much better, because you have all these life experiences and be more relatable and understandable to other people. You have such a wide range of be able to connect with people, if that makes sense.
I will say that I will admit that I'm not always the most mature person. I will say that academically in a business form, so such as this, or a very formal situation, I can be very mature and level-headed.
Yeah.
But in many cases, because of my mental illnesses, socially, that's a very different story. I can often act very irrational, and that can really drive people up a wall, I will say. And I mean, obviously, I'm probably not going to show that here in this interview, but I will say that, you know, truth be told, I am not necessarily very mature, especially when talking to people my age. And I think a lot of people know this, like my partner, he knows that I can be very, in some cases, very childlike in terms of getting upset about things very easily, if something frustrates me, bottling it up and then it will explode, knowing that I do show a lot of emotion. So I guess I would consider myself both very level-headed but also very emotional in the sense that I'm not thinking emotionally, so I don't understand emotional connections. I don't know how to help people. I'm not emotional in a conscious manner, but but my emotions go like all over the place. So I would cry, or I would, things like that. I do cry a lot. It's things like that where I outwardly show emotions and they just kind of come out, rather than being emotionally intelligent and actually working with people. But, and IQ-wise, I see the world in a perspective that's very logical and systematic. But again, that doesn't mean that I don't have, on the flip side, very wild or immature emotions. I feel like I'm both an adult and a young child at the same time, if that makes sense. And, that's kind of part of my ADHD being the more childlike aspect of me, and I guess the autism's more of an adult rather than. And then my anxiety kind of shifts back and forth between me being an utter coward and being like, oh, I don't want to do this. This is going to make me uncomfortable. That other people would normally find just a regular part of life. And for me to be able to do more complicated things like public speaking and working with children and things like that, that not a lot of people may feel comfortable doing, especially at my age. So it's really, it's really it just feels like an uneven platform.
You need like to be like in the middle, and then you're like a 100% unbeatable human being.
I'm definitely not unbeatable, I will say. I'm, again, like this, so this part definitely needs more help. But no one's perfect, and I accept that there are some things that I may struggle with more than other people, and some things that I may excel at in comparison to other people, and that's kind of life. And I wouldn't say I'm necessarily better than anyone else overall, because again, as a whole, this and this are ultimately similar, and I know other people who are also like this. So it really depends. I think that we're all inherently equal, and it's, our actions and our intentions that really, define someone, and whether they care about other people or whether they are more self-centered is what really defines a good person.
Yeah, it seems you know what your limits are, and like my limits are like I cannot do kids at all. Like I can't do I don't have the patience for them. I don't. So like I get like one thing, I'll be like never work with kids. I just can't do it. Like I'm not, like I could work on it and such, but like I can't do it, and I just accept that as my weakness and like just move on. So I feel like in your case, the more you grow, the more your weaknesses won't show as much, because you don't have to really. You're not dealing with kids anymore. You're gonna be dealing with adults. I mean, yeah, there are gonna be a lot of people that still suck, but like the deeper you get into your field, the more I think will be easier for you to mingle and hang out. But you're also growing with experience too. So now, like I feel like sometimes you're putting so much stress on yourself. I feel like you're putting so much stress on yourself about it too. But like I do understand, like when you have the anxiety, that you're always reflecting on yourself and like what can I do better. Like I'm sure you come out of like you're in the shower and you're thinking like, oh, I should have said this or I should have done that. Like
Definitely.
every day, and it's like down on yourself. And But like I think the biggest part of like that's hard for everyone is how to learn to let go. Many relationships are like, oh, if I said this thing or I said that thing, maybe we would be together or something. But like I just have to learn to let it go. Like I think that's the hard part for people. And then with my condition, like I have to let it go, or I could never grow as a person.
Yeah, that's been a big struggle for me, is letting people go. Because I try to form very deep relationships with people when I meet them, and it's, this comes back from being adopted. And because attachment theory forms in the first 10 months of an infant's life, and that's actually the time that I spent in the orphanage, so I never had a solidified caretaker, and there's studies that could very well have impacted both the influence of my perspective and my mental health. So now I have a lot of attachment issues, and it's been really a battle working with that, because I would get very attached to someone and they wouldn't feel the same way, or they would feel like, hey, this is a lot, I need my space. We had different boundaries, and then I would end up crossing boundaries that they weren't comfortable with. So there's a lot of, issues that I will say have plagued me. I wouldn't say I'm better than anyone else, again, because I would say with triumph comes also that double-edged sword of greater issues in your own right. And I would say everyone's
Well, I will say I think you're greater than a lot of people just based on you're aware of it. Like some people will just not think of what they're doing is wrong at all. They'll just move on with their life or whatever, but you're aware of your actions. You're aware of if you did hurt someone, of trying to help. So like you're better than a lot of people just being aware of it. Like you could be doing a lot of bad things, but if you're aware of it and kind of grow from it, that's way better than a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. I understand what you're saying. I will say this though, with my self-awareness, I guess the problem is that it's often very hard for me to move beyond that self-awareness. So I may be aware of what I'm doing wrong, but actually taking the steps to fix it, actually taking the steps to improve are much harder. And I think that that's the problem with me, especially because I know that they always say, like, the first step to fixing a problem is to realize you have it. For me, it's like, I've realized I've had this the entire time. Have I been able to do anything about it? Not really. I mean, that's part of my depression, is a lack of motivation in more than just physical aspects, but also the lack of motivation in terms of mental aspects. So I may know that I'm in a fight with someone. I may know that right now things are troubling, and I know that I should apologize and should step up to, try to mend things. The thing is, though, I may be very exhausted and be like, so.
Are you familiar with the phrase high school never ends?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like you're coming across the point that you're aware of it, but like I feel humans are very predictable in its own way. Like people are really just not gonna change. Like you can't. So it's always like like when you're dating someone, you always like, oh, I can make this guy into someone I like. Like you really can. You have to accept for who they are, and then you like them and you love them and you want to marry them. Great, but don't expect that person to change. Like maybe they'll change like 10% of themselves. It's just difficult because you either come across the point where like, I cannot change anymore. Did it who I am? People will have to accept me for who I am and how I act and stuff. And just some or did not. Some just cannot change. Like unless they have this horrifying accident, then yet a lot will change. But most people will just not change. Like if you let a person that was an asshole in high school, if you meet them 20 years later, they'll most probably be an asshole. And like there's just nothing you can do about it.
I think it really depends on the person and why they were an asshole. So for instance, I do think that people do have the ability to change, and as hard as it is and as negative as I can be, I would like to give people the benefit of the doubt. So, 20 years later, I may say maybe they aren't an asshole and go into this with an open mind. If they are an asshole, then I don't have to engage with them anymore. But if they're willing to look themselves and say, like, hey, I've done wrong here, and make an effort to change, and actually that effort is, underway, then I would say, like, hey, I'm going to keep my distance, but I'm going to be here to support you through that journey. Because I do think at the end of the day that, we shouldn't just give up on people. We shouldn't just, and that's my whole philosophy, and that also extends to my politics of being someone who would rather try to help the problem through systematic elements rather than just say like, oh, this person, stole something, so they're obviously going to be a thief for the rest of their life. I would say, well, why did they steal it? What drove them to? And if there's any environmental issues or personal issues that we can work with to help them so that they, have the capacity to change. That's the thing with my depression is it's often very hard for me to change as a result of my depression. That doesn't give me an excuse not to change, but it also gives an explanation of like, there are things in here that I cannot control that are bothering me right now. So trying to fix the depression will help me to grow as a person and help me gain the strength that I need to make that positive change on my own. So we need to give people a boost. And I think that that's been part of my philosophy, especially with wanting to start up a small business called Neurospira, where it caters STEM-related experiments to children who are neurodivergent. And I've waited for college to do this because I know that I'll be able to have the proper resources to reach out to professors who study these things so that I can get an accurate representation of the children that I'm going to be working with and provide them with tools that can help them succeed in life, learn a new perspective, and I really just ultimately, in the end of the day, I really want to help people, even if it doesn't necessarily benefit me personally.
I was gonna say that you're a better person than me. I just accept people as face value, and I think that's easier to assess them as face value because then you always, like, to me, I feel like you're thinking too hard about the person. I just accept them how they treated me at that time and such, and then move on with that. I think that's just easier because if you're giving everyone a benefit of doubt, I feel like you just hurt yourself more in the future because you're always giving them a chance. Like, I think for me, it's just easier to accept them at face value. Like let's say they don't want to hang out with you. They're just too busy or whatever. I just accept that they're too busy and just move on. Do I take it a little bit personally? Sure. But you can't keep... I feel like you're just giving people excuses to do what they do. And I did accept for someone, if they're an asshole, and I just move on. If they don't want to hang out with me, I just accept it and move on. I don't give them excuses like, oh, they're busy at work, or, something like... Yeah, I do understand people are busy at work, but, like, I accept it at face value, and I meet someone that I do like and appreciate, and they appreciate me. And I can't just... Or I'll just be sitting around forever just thinking that, like, oh, if they had more time or something, I can't... Life is short, and I just gotta move on.
I can understand that mentality. I think that it really depends on the circumstance of why that person is, and, maybe be busy or something like that. And I think that it's a spectrum. I wouldn't say I wait around forever for people or give everyone an excuse in whatever circumstances. I would say that, again, and it's between that moving on, like, that without giving people a chance, and, on the flip side of being too soft-hearted and too assuming that someone is going to, that always has the good intentions. And I think that, there needs to be a balance between that paranoid side of like, okay, I'm not dealing with this and just cutting them out of my life, versus someone who's always giving more and more chances and just wasting themselves as a person for the sake of others who aren't willing to provide them in the same way. So I think,
I'll give an example with podcasting. So I have to always find new guests to interview, and so I'll hit them up, and then if they don't respond, they didn't read it, fine, that's fine. So I'll comment on them to get their attention. If they don't respond to me, then I just move on. Or another thing is, let's say we are talking, and they go, oh, I'm busy, and then such. I did move on too, because the attention is that they're not even giving me a chance to try to interview them. They don't go, oh, I'm busy, but I can talk to you a month from now. And then there'll be those people who'll be like, I am busy, but I can talk to you in a month from now or a couple months from now. And it's like, okay, sweet. Like, you want to do it, you're putting your effort in, and then, and then there are people that will talk to me and they just not see it again either. We'll be in the middle of picking a time, and then they just never respond back. and then like I just move on. Like I can't, like I'm not gonna beg for them. The thing with like Instagram, like you go to direct messages, you click on my name, you read it, to like they did all those steps and they're not gonna respond, then that's fine. I'm just gonna have to move on. Like I can't, like there are gonna be
Yeah.
so many other people that I can interview. Like okay, there are some people that I feel like are more important. They have like more followers or connections, but like 99% of the people, I'm just gonna move on because you're just not that important to me, and it doesn't seem that important to you. Like yeah, I'm not. I don't want you to like miss your daughter's birth or something like that. That's understandable. But
Yeah.
but like you have to give me something. Like if you want to do it the interview or you don't, like I just move on, and I kind of what I do with kind of life. Like kind of give people 1 or 2 chances. They don't take it. I can't. In some case, maybe I am a little too cutthroat, but I can't. Like you mentioned before, I can't just wait forever either and such. And it's just not worth the effort. There's just so many other people I can interview. Like it's not. I get where you're coming from too. Like where you say like if someone's deceived, are they always deceived? No, no. That's a complicated answer. I will give them a benefit of a doubt in a way, but I think in terms of like effort wise, and you kind of can't give them a pass. You just have to accept as face value.
And I think that, that all goes back to, again, this is part of my politics of being someone who's definitely on the progressive side, of trying to really help people, help communities and stuff like that, and understanding why they do what they do, and having that open mind. But at the same time, you're right, we do need to protect ourselves to some extent. We can't just all be, ultimately giving, and I don't have the energy to do that because, I'm mentally ill. I got my own problems, and I think that, while I may say something, the actions that I take, I will admit, may not always be in other people's best interest, and, I can, in many cases, be selfish, and I understand that, there's reasons for why I do it. That doesn't necessarily give me ultimate justification to do that to other people, and that, like I mentioned, dismissing people's efforts to try to help me, that is definitely something that I really regret, and something that I'm trying to work on. But again, I'm not perfect, and many of us have different philosophies, different opinions, and mine's different from yours. I think that you and I definitely have different views in terms of many things, mindset, politics, and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily can't discuss these things in a relatively
Should we
positive
should we
manner.
start shouting at each other just for
No.
the podcast?
Just like cuts to us, screaming. But
No, I don't.
yeah.
Screaming doesn't do anything. It's weird because like we have opinions. There's no, maybe we can reach a middle ground, but like I made a video about the Sia thing, and you were very affected by it. And I get where you're coming from too, and I don't think my opinion is wrong. I think you think of the majority way, but I kind of try to think of the business way of it. I think my biggest point of it is that Sia couldn't hire an autistic person to play the role that she wanted in a healthy environment for the person. And then another thing is that if you really want to show like what an autistic person goes through in like a daily life, that movie or video cannot be watched by an autistic person because it will trigger them. So it's kind of like a weird, because if you comedy autistic people, then the regular person will not know what an autistic person feels like. So it's kind of like a little bit sacrifice from your end to better society, and it's kind of a weird. You get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, and I think my opinion on that was, I think while I understand that Sia is obviously a celebrity and her perspective is, she wanted to envision a certain thing, but I do think that what she envisioned was poorly researched and poorly educated by all accounts, so she should have really talked to people who were autistic and really gotten a better picture of that, so that to create a character that was both, had aspects of what she envisioned in the long run, but also was a realistic portrayal. And, because she doesn't have autism, so I don't really think that, not to say that she can't speak on it and all, but I don't think that it's really fair for someone who isn't in that community and has no education of that community to speak on behalf of what constitutes as it, because again, it's going out to the public, and the public may not know, like, this is an exaggerated persona. Maybe you know that, but a lot of people in the public don't. Like, I know that many people have a certain view of autism and think that it is the non-communication, the extreme, or the almost kind of fetishized idea of a savant person who's like this mega genius, like you've seen The Good Doctor and things like that. And it's not really leaving room for the wider width. It's either your, this was something that you mentioned before talking about, but someone did in, 7th grade, they did call me things like retarded, which are very derogatory. And, so either people assume you're that, or people assume that you're like this mega genius, and it just doesn't leave room for, an accurate portrayal of everyone.
Well, I just do want to say that the middle of the autism spectrum, let's say like the average person, it's not entertaining to like a movie, You have to do the extreme to it. Like you have to, like I see it as like a business and marketing, like if you just do a average autistic person, it's not gonna really make the film like the way she wanted it to be, Like that's where I'm coming from. Like you come from a more like social standpoint of like everyone should be accommodated for and everything, but I come from that not everyone can be accommodated. Like yes, you can accommodate an autistic person, but you can't. Sia couldn't make the film the way she envisioned it, given if she followed all like the social guidelines. So like that's where I defend Sia. I do agree that there's something that were like wrong, like someone jumped on an autistic person to calm down. That's just like insane to me. Like that, she shouldn't have done that at all. Like I give people like what, like I don't have a problem like calling people out, but I think I don't think she made a bad decision hiring a non-autistic person for her role just because she couldn't. The autistic person just wouldn't be able to do the role as much. So I'm just challenging that. And then it was also mean that how everyone just made Sia suicidal. And like I can't get it where you have a million people shouting at you that you did wrong, but
yeah, like the whole, I don't know, like like I get it. That's just a whole area of red. It's like I don't think you necessarily have a right to shout death threats at someone. At the same time, you have to understand where that anger comes from, and you have to understand that, like, whatever this is, could have, just because it maybe didn't affect me in that way, so maybe her movie didn't negatively affect me to that extent, it could have very well driven someone else to the brink of suicide, and you have to understand that maybe that's where that anger comes from. It's wanting other people to feel what they made you feel. So yeah, it's a really hard world of, I do think that, if I'm going to be honest, not to get super political here, but the idea of like everyone's being canceled, I think that that's being blown out of proportion. Like, I think most people just want to have someone hold you for, admit that you're wrong and admit that, what you did have a negative impact on other people, rather than, you never showing your face again. I think that that's something that a lot of people want, is just being held accountable. And again, free speech goes both ways. If you have the free speech to say something offensive.
I still defend Sia, and I will say she did something wrong with it, but I still defend Sia that the way she hired it was fine. And I'm going to be making more videos, like why, so like another topic I might come across is why can't we make fun of disability people? But we can make fun of someone that's, like Saturday Night Live, they can make fun of other people the way they act and such. How is it any different? So I'm going to dive into that more. Because the thing is, a regular person can't talk about disability people, because then it's like, you don't know us, you never did this, never did that. But I'm a disabled person, so I can talk from my perspective. Am I going to get hate mail? Probably. If people are going to agree with me too, probably. But I think it's a topic just to talk about, at least on a public platform. And I get where you're coming from, and it's difficult, but it's hard to, like, I'll just respectfully disagree with you. And I did, like, I don't want, like, of course I don't want someone to be, like, extremely upset and suicidal, but at the same time, if my thought makes you suicidal, I feel like there's something wrong with you that you behave so deeply about it too. Unless I say something really, really, like, harsh, like, let's say all this should die. That's it. I would never say that, but that's just terrible. But I think just at the societal standpoint, it's just definitely difficult. Politics is difficult too.
It is definitely a slippery slope to find it again. Like, I do understand being frustrated as a content creator and as a public figure if someone is giving you hate, and, you know, it's like, well, why don't you just, you know, leave? And there's a whole variety of factors that I think do need to be addressed and do need to be explored. This is a big, you know, thing as someone who is becoming more public and getting in more public action and things like that. I'm going to have to understand that many people are going to be, you know, have problems with that, especially, like, say I'm a protester, I have attended certain protests for certain actions and events, and, you know, we come into contact with a lot of counter-protesters occasionally, and, you know, there's definitely people who will attempt to label you as this or that or the other thing, and it is, you know, there is quite a bit of things, like, the reality is in life, it is hard to determine, you know, you can't make everyone happy, but I think it boils down to who are you trying to cater to, and why are you catering to this? Because if it's like, you know, what you said about being made fun of for disability, I kind of understand where you're coming from in that, like, you know, we should subject people to kind of the same area of regard. Like, if you know, a neurotypical person can be made fun of, why can't a neurodivergent person?
The way I view it, that a disability person wants to be treated as the same. So you have to be, if you want to be treated the same, then everything has to be treated the same. You can't pick and choose what you can or cannot have. So that's where I'm coming from.
I do think that the one difference, though, between, say, that and, like, someone who isn't disabled is the fact that, you know, you should be treated equally, right? Well, someone who isn't disabled obviously doesn't have that disability, so they're not going to be picked on for that. But I think, like, if you were to make fun, it's like this. So, say that I slip on a banana peel, and then a neurotypical person slips on a banana peel. You know that I'm autistic, right? But we shouldn't be making fun of me for being autistic. That's not something that someone else has. But you can equally say, like, oh, haha, it's funny that I took that action. I slipped on a banana peel. I slipped up. Things like that. And not stigmatize someone for their disability.
I guess where you're coming from, but it's also kind of weird too. Autism is a part of you, so, like, why should I not talk about this but talk about that? And that kind of. Before I take a mic away from you, is there anything you want to promote? Say any words of wisdom? The mic is all yours.
I would like to just say thank you for having me on, and something that I really want to promote is keep going, and if you have a platform, if you have something, advocate for awareness and advocate for whatever, you know, may be affecting you, because there are so many other people out there that you can help. And I do think that despite, you know, you are probably going to be facing a lot of challenges. I mean, I faced a lot of challenges, bullying, stigma, all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, you just need to keep fighting through it, because those people, you know, prove them wrong, be here in defiance, and, you know, keep moving forward.
Yeah, I don't know if my opinion affects you in any way, but I think...
No, it's fine. I understand the world you come from.
No, I'm just saying that I think me and the audience can understand that you're a kick-ass person, and anyone that knows me, whoever enters my life, I kind of choose carefully. And so I think everyone can agree that I think you're a kick-ass person. I think you have a great life ahead of you. We all know that you have your set of challenges, but I personally think that I think you do a kick-ass job wherever you go, and I think you have a lot of great things in your future that maybe you don't see it, but I definitely see it. It'll be great to follow your career and see where you go with your advocacy and your work in a biology field. Like, I think it'll be greatly helpful it's a great marriage of the two. Because biology is a lot with mental health. So I think that's a great marriage in it. So I'm excited where you go. Thank you, Maddie, for coming on here and talking to me. I know
Thank
we have a
you
lot
so
of
much.
differences, but thank you everyone for listening and watching, and I'll see everyone next time. Bye.
Bye.